Hi, everybody. This is Lloyd Rankin, president of the North American COP group. And we're fortunate today to have O3 speak about finding the one. And I'm not going to give away anything. I think you'll find this a very interesting session. So next slide, please, Steve. So this is in relation to the AWP conference that we're doing in London the first week in April. And we've got some information here on how you can register. It's a hybrid, so you can attend physically or virtually. And we have a website set up that should answer most of your questions. And we have a video that I think will help you understand what we're doing. Steve, if you could run the video, and if you have any questions during the session, please put your questions into the chat feature of GoToWebinar, and we'll address them at the end of the session.
European construction projects urgently need to address climate change, technology integration, and project performance issues. Advanced work packaging is viewed by leading global owners and EPCs as the preferred methodology for tackling such challenges. AWP shortens schedule, reduces waste, improves technology integration, and offers better predictability, while reducing risk and exposure to safety hazards. It can increase European construction productivity and help to combat the climate crisis by significantly improving project efficiency on large and small projects across multiple industry sectors. The AWP Conference Europe is a live hybrid event for in-person and virtual attendees, featuring 2 days of plenaries, breakouts and keynotes with world-class subject matter experts presenting brand new research and implementation resources. Register now to see why AWP and the technologies that support and enhance it are becoming the gold standard for integrated project delivery.
And I'm just going to hand this off to Andrew and let him introduce what he's going to talk about today.
Thank you very much, Lloyd. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody, depending on where you are today. We've got a fairly short session today, so what I'll be running through is I'll introduce myself, and then we're going to talk about framing the problem in terms of picking the right pilot project for AWP, how we're going to find the solution, and then I'm going to run you through the two tools that we're talking about, the selection criteria tool and the return on investment tool. So for those of you I haven't met, my name's Andrew Foy. I'm the VP of AWP and Construction Excellence for O3 Solutions. And among other things on my resume or CV, I was the co-chair of the Performance and Benchmarking Subcommittee for CII that built the two tools that we're going to be reviewing today. Okay, so firstly, framing up the problem. We have probably, anybody who's been involved in AWP for any amount of time has probably heard any one of these answers, reasons, justifications, excuses, call them what you will. And a lot of these are the responses we get when we start talking about doing AWP on a project. We don't need it. You know, my favorite, it doesn't work. We've done this 100 times. We've been doing this for 30 years. It's difficult for us to understand and justify how and when to implement AWP. So what we're looking at here is AWP implementation is still a matter of divided opinion and subjectivity. We are relying on judgment calls of people. We're relying on a project manager who's attended an AWP conference saying, yeah, I heard about this. I think this will help. We're relying on the company having the foresight to hire an AWP champion who's going to help drive the message throughout the organization. But in some cases, we're going to have multiple projects in the same organization taking different approaches to AWP, some doing it, some not doing it. We don't have that level of standardization, and we aren't able to answer very, very simple questions. For example, should we do AWP on every project? Should we do AWP at all? Should we do it on none of our projects? Do any of our projects work? Does it only apply for mega or giga projects? Who makes the decision? Is this something that some senior executive up in your, CEO's office should be making that decision? Do you really expect your CEO or anybody in the C-suite to understand enough about AWP to make this decision? So at what level of the organization does this decision need to be made, and who needs to sponsor that decision to make sure it actually goes somewhere? When should the decision be made is another critical one, because we always find time and time again people trying to implement AWP too late. And we've published a lot of information about this, and I know the industry as a whole is trying to get to true AWP. The advanced part of AWP is talking about doing it sooner in the process. So if you start AWP a week before construction, firstly, that's not AWP, and secondly, your benefits are going to be limited. So when do we make those decisions? And then, unfortunately, until the world changes, a lot of this is always going to come down to money. So it's a question of justifying the use of AWP, making a business case for the use of AWP in a way that management can support it. You need to be able to present management with an understanding of this is a good idea and here is why. So what are we seeing? What are we seeing too often today? A lack of consistent application of AWP within the industry as a whole, but even within an organization. For example, you have a capital projects group at a refinery that's doing dozens of projects a year, and there's no consistency in the way these are being considered for AWP selection. Somebody decides, yeah, I've done this before and I liked it, we're going to do it. Or, I've done this before and I didn't like it, so we're not going to do it. A lot of it comes down to that level of subjectivity and opinion. We're not creating a clear understanding of which projects will benefit from it and what those benefits even are. So that gives us uncertainty over which project characteristics inform the decision. Is it just about size? Everything over X number of millions of dollars or millions of pounds should do AWP and everything under that doesn't? Or is it more nuanced than that? And I'll give you a hint, it's a little more nuanced than that. So like I said, we're seeing a lot of that subjectivity and opinion. We're not getting a repeatable and critically an auditable process. So you sit there and think, a lot of what we do these days has to go through assurance reviews and audits and decisions that we make that lead to stage gates. AWP needs to be one of those where we sit in a stage gate and get asked, why did you or did you not decide to do AWP on this project? And until we have a repeatable, auditable process, it's always just going to be because I felt like it or I didn't. Another key consideration is not all AWP implementations are the same. It's not a one-size-fits-all process. For example, you can start with, a lot of organizations will start with just workplace planning. Let's just tackle the field. And then they'll grow backwards into early engineering planning stages. Other organizations will tackle it directly from engineering, try and build a decent path of construction, and not do anything in the field. And then again, once they get familiar with the early stages, they can expand up into it. Some companies will just use it for creating decent CWP so they can get good bids on their construction work. There are multiple ways to skin this particular cat. So why is it important? Because until we can do this in a repeatable way and have a good understanding of what we're doing with it, you're not going to get all the benefits from it. You're not going to know the big headline of you can save 10% of your TIC if you use AWP. You won't get there if you're not doing it. And you certainly won't get there if you're not doing it properly. The AWP implementations are going to continue to be a fight. You're going to have typically, and unfortunately I've been this person, you have one voice in the room trying to call for it and a bunch of other people who don't understand it, don't want to do it. You create a situation where it becomes a struggle, it becomes a battle. And every time we do a new project, I have to justify why we're going to do AWP on this project. Every time we do a new project, you have to talk about the business case and what the benefits are, and there's a lot of that continuous education. That subjectivity and opinion is always going to cloud the decision-making process. A lot of times it can come down to, I had a good experience with this last time, or I sat through a presentation that made it sound really good. So that's purely subjective, and people aren't necessarily looking at the mechanics and the metrics and the benefits in the light of day of cold, simple, hard calculations and numbers. It can also impact the timing, the expectations, and another important aspect, the understanding of success. So when we say understanding of success, what we're talking about is, in order to agree to implement something like AWP, firstly, you need to decide that there is a problem that needs to be fixed, which is typically productivity in the field. And once you've agreed that there is something to be fixed, because frankly, if you don't determine that there's a problem that needs to be fixed, you're not going to make any efforts to fix it. Simple human nature. Once you've determined that there's a problem that needs to be fixed, what are we going to try and fix? How are we going to fix it? And then understanding the success means setting your criteria for assessment of the program at a later date. What are our key performance indicators? What are we trying to achieve by implementing AWP? And we need to do that in such a way that says at the end of the project, or at a certain suitable assessment time throughout the phase of the project, are we on track? Are we going to meet the promises that we made? And also we need to keep those promises realistic. If this is the first time you're doing AWP, and this is the first project that you've ever executed it on, and I'll whisper this quietly because I know some people get surprised to hear this, that 10% TIC saving, you're likely not going to hit it. Because if you look at the information and the research that led to that, they showed a clear correlation between AWP maturity and the savings and benefits that you're going to get from it. You will get savings and benefits the first time you do it, but you will also learn a lot of lessons and you will get better as you do it again and again. So the importance of this is understanding that in that first phase, the success and the benefits that you're going to get from it will be more limited than they will in later projects. I've done projects where our first time rollout, the intent was meet schedule and meet budget, not even save anything. Because for certain projects, especially mega projects or giga projects, being on time and on budget is a huge win. That's a massive, massive, massive success. And we were just using AWP essentially as a risk mitigation strategy to achieve the goals of the project. And if we did that, it was worth it 100 times over. And companies need to create clearly defined guidelines for the use of AWP. What are we doing? How are we doing it? And why are we doing it? So what can we do? How are we going to tackle this? Firstly, it's a question of asking the right questions and knowing what questions to ask, and that's what we'll get to. Using those questions to make informed decisions. Use the results of that Q&A to understand if this makes sense to do AWP, and then bake those processes into a standard for your organization. So don't just have everybody else going around asking their own questions. Make it a repeatable process. Take away the opinions and the subjectivity of it. Good news is you're not alone in doing this. This road has already been well trodden, and what we've done is the Performance and Benchmarking Subcommittee built these two tools that we're going to talk about, the Selection Criteria tool and the Return on Investment tool. These are both available to CII members, but we're also planning to provide them at the AWP conference in London to any attendees that are not CII members. So what are they? First up, the Selection Criteria tool. Essentially, it's just a series of questions. It's a series of questions about project characteristics. How big is it? How complex is it? Is it greenfield? Is it brownfield? What we're looking for is all of the various nuances that can change the characteristics or inform the characteristics of the project that will determine the usefulness of AWP. We're trying to get away from AWP can't be used on any project, or it must be used on every project. And we're trying to make an informed decision in the middle, because there will be some projects right at the bottom end that probably won't get any benefit from it. If they're only $500,000 project, a single vendor building a single skid that you're going to pick up and put down, no intermingling with other disciplines, very, very simple scope. There's some time that it's not going to make much sense to do it. But then on the higher end, you get into larger projects, a lot more intricacy, a lot more interface points. There's going to be a much, much higher need for it. So if you have a series of predetermined answers for each of these questions. So how many interface points, what's the schedule, achievability, things like that. And for each of those answers, you get a score. So what this scoring does is it looks at the, I suppose, complexity of the answer. So the lower complexity, the lower scale answers will get a lower score, and the higher scale ones will get a higher score. And then at the end of it, the scores are tabulated, and the higher your overall score for the project, the greater benefit you're going to see from AWP. So what that means is we're going to say to you, if you've got a very high score, you definitely need to be doing AWP. If you've got a very, very low score, it might not be worth doing. This is a very, very simple, easy to use Excel spreadsheet. This is not a complicated tool. This is something everybody will be able to run directly from their computer. So based on the answers, the tool will give you that recommendation. The important thing to remember with this and with these two tools is the two tools here will work very, very well in tandem. So you can look at the recommendation from the selection criteria tool and also do that return on investment calculation for the project using the return on investment tool, which we'll get to in a minute. That will help you validate the commercial aspect of this decision. So the selection criteria tool will say the characteristics of the project lend themselves to AWP, but go away and do the ROI calculation to make sure that you're actually going to get a good benefit and a good financial benefit from doing AWP on the project. And the second part of what it does is it doesn't just say you should or should not do AWP. It talks about which category of AWP you're going to do. And this is something that the Performance Benchmarking Committee put together as a previous deliverable where we started looking at the categorization and the various ways you can do it. Category A, for those eagle-eyed amongst you wondering why there's no category A, category A is the default, the baseline, which is we're not doing AWP. Category B is we're just doing workplace planning, just the field portion. Category C, we're starting to grow it back into the engineering stage. We're doing some basic engineering planning and workplace planning. And then category D, we're doing full AWP right from FEL2, FEL3, pre-feed feed, whatever you call it, all the way up to commissioning and startup. So the tool is going to look at if, for instance, you fill in the tool and you say, it'll ask you the stage of the project and you say, we're at the end of detailed design, we're just about to go into construction. The tool is going to tell you your only option is to do workplace planning. If, however, you say we're right at the beginning and there's other characteristics that we look at, and if all of those allow for it, we will say you have the capacity on this project to do full category D, full AWP. The ROI tool, so this is the other of those two tools that we're talking about. This is the one that assesses the cost and the benefit. This, again, it's a very, very simple tool. In this case, you put in very simple, I think it's 4 or 5 in pieces of information right at the beginning, and it will populate for you. So you tell it what is the size of the project in terms of total installed cost, what's the duration, and we look at duration from construction and cycle time. And then you can select your AWP maturity, whether this is something you're doing for the first time, whether this is something that you do all the time and it's baked into your company processes. And then we look at the AWP category, those B, C, and D that we were just talking about. And based on those, the benefits will scale. So if you're doing workplace planning only and you're only doing it for the first time, you're going to get a fairly low return of your benefit. If, however, you've been doing AWP for 5, 10 years, you're really good at it, it's baked into your company standards, and you're doing full AWP, that's when you're going to hit that 10% TIC value. So then the tool uses a series of industry standard, industry predefined metrics to calculate the costs and the benefits for AWP on the project. It's it's an Excel spreadsheet. It's very easy to use. It's fully locked down, so you can't mess with the calculation field, but critically, there are user definable values in there for almost everything. So you can say, we have said, for example, that labor will make up 40% of the total amount of the project. If you're doing, for example, a heavy modularization project, you might only have 20% of the TIC value representing field labor. So you can go in and modify that number. What's the output? So the most important output from this is a recognition that AWP does cost money. That's always one of the big uphill battles we fight. Everyone says, oh, well, we don't want to pay for planners. Yes, there is a cost, but it is balanced by the potential savings that are available. So we look at, and these two graphs you can see here show the blue is the cost, the green is the saving, therefore the green is taller than the blue, and the orange represents the delta between those. So as long as you see an orange bar, you're making savings. So you can use this as the basis for a business case to go to your management and say, despite the fact that we recognize there will be costs, the benefits are expected to outweigh those costs. And for those packages, for those projects that are planning to use categories B or C, workplace planning or basic AWP, it'll also give you a graph, and this is the one on the right-hand side, what you could have won, what the return would have been if you'd have gone to category D full AWP. So you can see, for example, this one, your chosen category shows you can plan to save 2.4% of your project TIC. If you'd gone with full AWP, you could get up as much as 3.6%. So it gives you sort of an impetus for the future. And obviously this is based on a lower maturity organization. Once you get up to that high maturity, that's when you start seeing some like 10% return. Okay, so that is a very, very quick synopsis of the two tools that we're planning to show. This is just intended to be a little bit of a teaser. We're going to be presenting this in a bit more detail at the AWP conference in London. Our time slot is on the Tuesday at 4 p.m. local time. So we will be presenting both of these tools and showing you the value of using them and actually showing you how simple they are to use. We'll sort of be filling them out right in front of you, just to make it a little bit more interesting, especially for people whose accent might be similar to mine. And remember, these days, we're going to take a slightly innovative approach to the material. So for those of you who remember ITV in the UK in the 90s, we are going to be presenting this as a Saturday night favorite. We're going to be doing this as Blind Date, the AWP Conference Edition. So just to make it a little bit more fun and a little bit more engaging, we're going to be taking our lead from Scylla in the 90s. And with that was a fairly quick run through, but like I said, we wanted to keep this as just a bit of a teaser. So with that, Steve, are we seeing any questions coming through on the GoToMeeting side?
Indeed, yeah. We do have a question which we get often, so maybe I'll just address it right off the top. Will the conference presentations be available after the conference for those that could not attend? I can tell you for sure, of course, we want to and hope to see everybody live and in person. But if you can't make it to the conference in person, we do have a virtual option. You can attend remotely, and all virtual attendees will have on-demand access to all sessions after they conclude. All of our plenary sessions, keynote presentations will be live streamed, as well as one of our 3 breakout tracks will also be live streamed. So you'll have a blend of live streamed content and on-demand content as a virtual attendee. So yeah, take a look at the registration guide that we'll send you at the conclusion of this webinar, or you can even download it from the handouts tab right now and take a look at your registration options there. So thanks for that question. Next question here, are these tools available only to CII members? That might be a question for you, Andrew or Lloyd.
Yeah, so these tools are on CII's website. They're on the AWP landing page on CII, but we recognize that as part of presenting these at the conference, we are aiming to make them available to the attendees so that everybody can get their hands on them. And this is just intended to help those people who are getting into AWP for the first time, really starting to get on that AWP journey. So we want to make sure that they're available.
Perfect. Thank you very much. How can I receive the ROI tool or the AWP selection criteria tool if I won't be in person at the conference? And that might be just have already been answered by your previous reply there, Andrew. But
yeah, I assume Lloyd will make them available to attendees in some digital fashion.
Okay, great. Just a comment from Jenny. Thank you, Lloyd, Andrew, and Steve, for a great presentation. Thank you for attending, Jenny. We really appreciate it. Is it
And
possible
Jenny,
to
come join us. Jenny, come join us in London when we do this in a bit more detail and a bit more fun.
Yeah, I was going to say, Andrew, that typically what we will do is right in the app that you'll get as a virtual or physical attendee, we'll have the tools available. So you'll be able to have them at the conference, whether you're physically there or whether you're just attending virtually.
Fantastic.
That's a good point. Yeah, we'll be. Yeah, we've got some great digital tools, a mobile app for the in-person attendees, and of course a virtual event portal for the virtual attendees, and we'll be able to upload all sorts of great stuff for you there, including, you know, session slides, these tools, etc. Comment here from Carlos: very useful tools for us that are in the journey of starting to implement AWP. Absolutely, yes. How much savings are expected on the first project you execute AWP? So just a basic AWP question for you, Andrew.
Yeah, so I mean, the key to this is making sure that there are savings, firstly, and that's where the ROI tool comes in. Some of the characteristics of the project in terms of its size and its duration and the intent of which category of AWP will guide exactly the amount that you would expect to see back. But like I said, temper the expectations on your first one. Don't advertise you're going to make 10% TIC savings. A lot of projects, and I'm talking good sized projects that I've worked on, our intent was just to meet the deliverables, just to meet the time and the budget. And a lot of times that's success. Now, I would still look for success against your standard returns and against your standard performance, but I would just caution against promising the earth. A 2% saving on TIC for the first time you do AWP should be considered a success, not a failure. So make sure you set the right expectations and grow it from that first time out.
So I think we got time for one last question. Is there any other questions, Steve, that we can respond to?
Is there a standard template to measure success / KPIs?
Yeah, so the previous tool that was built by the same subcommittee was the maturity level benefits tool. Again, that's available on CII's website. That's not one of the ones we're presenting here, but it was the precursor to these two tools. That talks a lot more about the categorization. And within that tool, we have a series of KPIs for both adoption, to make sure you're actually adopting it properly, and then the benefits and outcomes from AWP. So that is available in that maturity level benefits tool on CII's website.
Great. And I just want to thank Andrew for a great presentation. I want to let you know that next week we've got the keynote from the European conference. He's going to be doing a short webinar on AWP and project delivery in the race for zero. I think that's going to be a great session. So love to see you next week. And as always, be safe, and we'll talk to you all soon. Thank you.
Thanks again, O3, and hope to see you all at the conference in April. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.